employment benefits for Americans, former Prime Minister of the UK, Gordon Brown, says he has a solution for avoiding a worldwide economic crisis. CBS News' Bill Plante spoke with the former Prime Minister about his new book, Beyond the Crash, Overcoming the First Crisis of Globalization.
And welcome to Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister of Britain and former Chancellor of the Exchequer, who has a message in a new book called Beyond the Crash about the global economy. You want to fix things by globalizing the regulation of the banks.
Look, stage one was to prevent a Great Depression, and the world did come together to do that. But stage two and stage three of coming out of this crisis have not yet been completed. Stage two was building a financial system which was stable, sustainable, and could make sure that people could get lending started again. Stage three was getting growth into the economy so that people could have jobs. And in America and Europe, we've reached this point at which we're now being outproduced, outmanufactured, outinvested by China, India, and the rest of the world. And we've got to set ourselves on a course for the future where we can create jobs, get growth, but you need a stable financial system to do that.
Well, you're calling for an explicit statement of ethics and rules to prevent the kind of crisis we had in 2008 from happening again.
Yeah, I think in our ordinary lives, we value people of integrity, people we can trust, people who play by the rules, people who don't take irresponsible risks. And I think if you're buying from a small business in your local area, you're going to value their integrity and their responsibility. But I think in the banking system, we seem to assume that people could make reckless decisions, gamble with people's monies, speculate with people's money. And you know, we had all these terms, CDOs, CDSs, credit default swaps and everything. It seemed to me to be hiding what was really happening, which was betting with other people's money and speculating with other people's money. We've got to have standards, rules, and I think they've got to be based on principles. But you can't have it just in one country now, because another country can bring down a country that's got a good financial system. It's got to be global, and that's why I'm appealing to the regulators and to governments to really come together to get a clear set of rules that will be applied in all the major financial centers.
Well, forgive me, but this sounds a little utopian.
I don't think so, because I think people realized during the financial crisis that the world had to work together, otherwise we would have had a Great Depression. We brought the G20 together, American leadership of course, but 20 of the biggest countries in the world came together and they decided what they would do to underpin the world financial system. Now you take that one stage further, and what you say is, what are the rules that are going to guide us in the future, so that we don't have a race to the bottom, where if something is tough in America, people just go to Switzerland, or if something's tough in Switzerland, they just go to Liechtenstein, or if something's tough in Liechtenstein, they go to the Bahamas. You've got to have global rules that people will enforce in each of the major financial centers.
And how do you get the banks to sign on to this?
The banks are really recipients of huge amounts of public support. We found in the crisis that we were operating capitalism without capital. They didn't have enough capital. And so the banks really have got to go with where the public policy is going. And I think in each of the major financial centers, the political will of governments cooperating together across the world to change the financial system would work. You cannot risk another crisis like this again. The danger, in my view, is that this crisis is not yet over and another financial crisis will come down the road. And the reason is that we will not have sorted out the system in such a way that people can get away with breaking the rules.
Where do you see it coming from if there is a sort of second wave?
There's obviously volatility in the financial market still. There's uncertainty about the capital that different banks have. There's uncertainty about the financial systems in some of the emerging market countries as well, where there's massive investment at the moment. And you need a global early warning system. You need people to be looking at what's happening. If one of your companies is operating in 20 countries but is only being regulated in one, it doesn't really make sense. And if there are companies around the world that are global financial institutions that are basing themselves in regulatory havens and tax havens, then they will escape the jurisdiction that we need. You're not going to be able to have a stable financial system doing the job it needs to do unless you have a form of global early warning and a global financial supervision.
But you know you'll get pushback from anyone who's committed to laissez-faire.
But that failed. Everybody knows that failed. When the markets collapsed in 2008 and 9 and froze, there was nobody there to take us out of this except governments. Now, I'm a great believer in markets and in competition, but it's actually because I believe in markets and competition and that they should work in the public interest that I'm determined that we have the right rules and the right supervisory procedures so that we can have a stable financial system that is serving the industry and the consumers of our country.
Let's talk a little bit about the aftermath of this and where, for instance, Britain and America are right now. I mean, in Britain, you've got a tremendous austerity program underway. In America, we have what will amount to a second stimulus if this tax bill passes.
Well, I think you've got to separate those things you've got to do for a recovery and those things where you've got to make fiscal consolidation work. So in Britain, in my view, and I'm not the person who represents the orthodox opinion here, I think it would be very stupid of us to cut education and to cut universities and to cut research and development at a time when we have got to prepare and equip ourselves for the future. There's going to be a billion people middle class market out there in Asia. There's going to be twice the size of America in consuming power in the rest of the world over the next few years. That's the big change that we're about to see. A massive consumer market for the rest of the world that America, Britain, Europe can actually benefit from. But to be able to sell products there, you've got to have the best education, the best skills, you've got to have the best technology. And so I would not, in this period of fiscal consolidation, cut what is really the investment you need in the future. And that's your schools, your education, your universities, your technology, your science. I think that is a short-term gain for a long-term loss.
Well, there's the reason that you've got thousands of people in the streets in London.
Well, violence of any sort I deplore. Violence in the cause of any purpose in a democracy is unacceptable. But there's a fundamental issue here, and the fundamental issue is whether you invest in education because you believe that's essential for your future, and I think the same debate is going on in America, or whether you cut investment like everything else, and then you take a chance about your future. You take a risk, because basically the investment in technology in China and in education in India is going to happen in the next 10, 15 years, and we cannot afford to be left behind. What we've got to do to win in these markets of the future, because people will write this decade off as either, if you like, the decline of the West economically in relation to China or Asia, or the revival of the West, because actually we've got industries that are actually more powerful and more successful than the rest of the world. It depends on education and science. It depends on free trade and us not becoming protectionist, and it depends on global cooperation and countries working together. So if I were still a leader, I would be pressing for the G20 or any organization that's got international standing to really look again at how we can create greater growth in the world economy. It's not inevitable that millions of people have got to be unemployed at this point, and it's not inevitable that we have a decade of low growth, but that's what's happening at the moment, because people see there's no alternative.
You're predicting a decade
unless
of low
we take
growth.
action. Unless we take action. And I think people in America see the problem. They see that unemployment is around 10%. They see that consumer spending is likely not to rise fast, and that had been the big driver of growth in the past. They see banks deleveraging. They see small businesses not getting money from the banks and therefore unable to invest. And they see the protectionist sentiment growing, and therefore trade is not going to be as big a sort of driver of growth as it could be. Now, there's a way out of that, and that is for the big countries to get together, to plan a global growth strategy for the next few years. China's got to consume more. India, the rest of Asia has got to play their part as well. Europe's got to get out of this inflexibility that is causing it to grow very slowly. And America's probably got to invest while at the same time doing fiscal consolidation. Now, if you had these things happening together around the world, you'd have higher growth, less unemployment. I suspect you could have 50 million more people in jobs by 2014 if you took the advice that many people are giving.
But it's one thing to say that China has to consume more, and quite another to get the Chinese government to adopt a monetary policy which would allow that.
Yeah, but you see, the difference is between, if you talk about the currency, obviously the Chinese are going to see it as a matter of their national sovereignty, that they should be able to choose what their currency is and what it's set at. But if you talk about China's policies, China is committed to eliminating poverty amongst its masses, to creating a new middle class and giving them consuming power. But at the moment, perhaps only a third of what is produced in China is consumed by Chinese citizens. And therefore, a lot of people in China would like to have a better middle class lifestyle. Now, if we were to say to China, let us help you achieve your objective, but you let us help us achieve ours. America wants jobs, and it wants higher prosperity over the next few years. China needs to take people out of poverty and give them a middle-class lifestyle. The two things are not irreconcilable. and you could get an international agreement on that, just as you could get an international agreement on trade. In 2008 and 2009, people said it was impossible for the countries to get together to stop a Great Depression or to restructure the banks, which we did. We managed to do that, and we can do this again.
I'd love to talk to you again after there's an international meeting and see how they do.
Well, I think it can be done, but of course it needs dynamism, and it needs a recognition that together you can make a difference and do better than you just do on your own.
Gordon Brown, the book is Beyond the Crash. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.